Hello, welcome to Rogue Startups. I'm your host, Craig Hewitt. Here, each episode, I'm going to be sharing a nugget and a piece of wisdom that I'm learning from growing my business, Castos, from 7 to 8 figures and hopefully beyond. You know, business is tough. There's no easy button to push to take all the right answers and the shortcut to guaranteed success. But I truly believe that with the collective wisdom we have from this tech community, we really can do better and easier than we could alone. You know, I'm basing a lot of this on an amazing amount of help and feedback I've gotten from other podcasts and other founders and other YouTube channels. And this is my attempt to give back a little bit to the community to help you grow your business more sanely, to a higher level, more profitably, to where you're having a better experience in this journey. I sincerely hope you like the new format here. You want to connect with me, head over to Twitter. I'm at @TheCraigHewitt. And for show notes for this and every episode, roguestartups.com. Let me know what you think. Hello, welcome back to Rogue Startups. Today I'm chatting with Rob Walling. Rob, how's it going?
It's going great, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, totally. I think you are our most frequent guest on the show. So it is, but it has been a hot minute since we chatted. You know, I think followers of the show and certainly of startups for the rest of us would know that like you were a mentor or a coach of mine before TinySeed. I'll never forget this.
That was fun.
You sold Drip and I'd reached out to you before and was like, hey, what do you think? And you're like, I'm too busy. And you sold Drip and I think like, maybe I gave you 2 weeks. And I was like, hey.
What do you think? Not
what
too
do you
busy
think?
anymore, I guess. Yeah.
And then like, yeah, being like the first batch of TinySeed, what I'm getting is I think you know my business more than probably anyone else outside of the company. And so it's super cool. And I know you and TinySeed and all the stuff that you're doing with MicroConf and everything really well. And so it's cool to be able to chat with someone where you don't have to explain all of that stuff. And we can bypass and get into the meat of things, which I'm excited about.
Yeah. You don't have to ask me, so how did you get into entrepreneurship? So when I was in 6th grade, it's like, I don't know. I don't want to hear any of that, actually. We have the context and the jargon, so to speak. So those are the best episodes I find on my own show, you know, is when people come on. Like you've been on Startups for the rest of us, I'd say half dozen times now. And those episodes wind up being really good for exactly the same reason. Yeah.
So for folks who don't know, Rob Walling, previously founder of Drip, sold to
Lead Pages.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but then
I wanted to say something else that would have been the ultimate faux pas, but I didn't. Sold to Lead Pages.
I know.
Left there after a year or two. Started TinySeed, which is a startup accelerator for bootstrap companies.
For SaaS companies,
and Castos was one of the members of the inaugural batch there, which was 3 years ago now, which is amazing. So TinySeed, MicroConf, startups for the rest of us. Anything else?
Those are the 3 things I do these days. I just wrote a book called the SaaS Playbook. That's probably the fourth big thing. That was a heck of a lot of fun.
Let's talk about the book, man. I got a digital version of it and on audiobook. So like,
should have had this ready. See, if I was a pro, this would have been ready.
So for those of you watching on YouTube, so first of all, check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/Rogue Startups. So tell me about the book, man. SaaS Playbook. How'd it come about? I know you said before you'd never write a book again. I think like at a really high level, why write a book, man? You've already written a book, successful exit, startup accelerator, investor, all this kind of stuff. What's the impetus there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this is depending on how you count, it's my 4th book. Okay, so Start Small, Stay Small is the one everyone kind of knows me for. Sherry and I co-wrote a book called The Entrepreneur's Guide to Keeping Your Shit Together, which still sells quite well, and I think a lot of people could use it. But she did 80+% of the writing, and I'm a with on it. So it's like I'm a co-author. And then my 3rd one was a collection of like all my writings, all my essays for my blog. So it's a 250-page book called Start Marketing the Day You Start Coding, and you can actually, it's just a PDF. You can download that for free at robwalling.com, enter your email and get it. But it's 250 pages and it still holds up reasonably well. There's a few examples that are dated, you know, because it's stuff from 10, 15 years ago. But the reason I wanted to do the SaaS Playbook was actually because I was ranting to a mutual friend of ours one day on a call. Ruben Gomez, founder of Signwell. And I was like, what are the good books? I said, people keep asking me, what are the good books they should be reading for SaaS founders? And I'm like grasping, right? I'm saying, well, Traction by Gabriel Weinberg, because that, and if you read that, it's a good book, but it's a decade old now. And even just the marketing approaches I read through, and it's like, well, that doesn't really work anymore. And that doesn't work like that anymore. And so Ruben said, man, you really got there. He said, I've read them, all the ones that are out today. They're not good. And I think the phrase that got me to do it is he said, our community needs you to write a book about SaaS. And I was
no
like,
pressure, man.
Dang it. So that was it. And of course, that was 2.5 years ago. And I was like, I can crank this thing. My first book I wrote in like 3 or 4 months. I can do that again. Not realizing that my first book I wrote when I was working like 10 hours a week, I was doing the 4-hour work week at that time. Now I run TinySeed, MicroConf, the podcast. So it took me a long time to get this one done.
Yeah. I heard of an episode of Startups for the Rest of Us where you talked about content repurposing. I mean, whatever. You've talked about everything there is to talk about in startups and SaaS, right? And so like there's not anything at a high level. There are no totally new ideas in this book, I'm sure, that you haven't talked about on your podcast or YouTube channel or something before. But to like what extent did you try to take your existing content as a basis for the book, I guess is what I'll ask.
Yeah. So here's what's interesting. When in the original conversation with Ruben, I said, oh man, I think it should cover it's got to have pricing and market and, product market fit and marketing and these other things, right? I started just sketching out high level in my head. And I said, I've kind of recorded episodes or YouTube videos or whatever on all this topic. I bet like 75% of it is already down somewhere. And if I get it transcribed and then have a writer kind of repurpose it, you might call him a ghostwriter, but I struggle with that because a ghostwriter to me sounds like they're doing the writing and it's not your stuff. These are all my ideas and my concepts, right? Turns out I did try to do that, and not even with a ghostwriter. I just pulled stuff in and was rewriting it and doing it, and it wasn't very good. And I got about 30,000 words in. Most of my books are about 200. They're pretty compact, but they're about 200-ish pages, 205, whatever. It's about 40,000 words. I got 25 or 30,000 words in, and I read through it, and I was like, this is just a disjointed melange of a bunch of crap, Yeah. And so I actually yanked 15,000+ words out of it into another Google Doc. And then I said, what should I really write about, whether I have existing content or not? And that was the thing, is there was, in fact, if you go in this book, more than half the book was new thinking that doesn't exist anywhere else. Surprisingly enough. Yeah. Like the whole chapter on building team and hiring, that now exists as a MicroConf talk because I repurposed the chapter from the book into that. But that chapter started when a TinySeed founder, and this is the best way to create content. TinySeed founder, it was Iran with Jim Desk. He asked me a pretty in-depth question about hiring and how to think about it. And I said, well, give me all the details. He gave me this thing, and I wrote him back a 2,000-word email, where I was like, hey, are you, and I told him in advance, like, are you cool if I give you a lot of thoughts on this? And he said, yeah. And I wrote this super long thing, and I was like, that's the start of a chapter, because it was all new. It was new frameworks that I was pulling out of my head. So that's how it wound up being. Again, more than half the book wound up being responses I'd posted on Indie Hackers or in conversations with actual founders, which I think is why the book is resonating with people, because it's not just pie in the sky. Oh, here's an example from how Intuit and Microsoft would do it, or look what Basecamp did. It's like, no, this is the advice that like I'm actually giving to founders. And so I really believe in it.
Yeah. Yeah. I can totally relate because, I mean, like you, I create content on a handful of different channels now. And even though the topics I talk about are similar between long form YouTube and short form YouTube and here and LinkedIn and God forbid Twitter, like it's all different, man. Even if it's the same topic, the depth and the format and the approach that I take to talk about our team retreat. I talked a lot about that really because we just did it about a month ago. It's all entirely different. So it's not surprising that then a book is different yet again, because it's just such a different, I even think it's like it's a different format because it's written, but long form, but then it's like, you're not going to talk the same way in a book as you do on a YouTube video.
No. And even so, another example of where repurposing we've struggled with is I have almost 700 episodes of Startups for the Rest of Us. And for the past several hundred, we've recorded video for all of them. So it's like, well, why not repurpose it? I do Q&A episodes where there's a question, a video question from a listener, and then I answer the question. Isn't that amazing YouTube content? Let's just repurpose all that. And we spent dozens of hours doing that and just zero traction because the format doesn't fit the medium. And so if you look, if you go to microconf.com/YouTube and actually look at our YouTube channel, and you can see the views, obviously you see what's successful. It's all YouTube native stuff that I have recorded. Even again, it covers the exact same topic as the podcast, but it has to be tighter, has to be more poppy, has to have more camera angles, or just whatever. It's the MTV version of the topic, I'll admit.
It's exhausting just talking about it.
It really is. Two old guys being like, ugh.
All right, so I want to talk about YouTube versus podcast because I think that's a huge topic. But just staying on the book, when does it make sense for someone to write a book? Like you're talking to Johnny SaaS founder like me, been in this a while, thought leadership, personal brand, all that's important, can actually have a business impact because, it can drive for you leads to companies signing up and becoming TinySeed companies or investors or whatever. When would you say, okay, I've exhausted the blog and social and YouTube and podcasting and community, and now it's time to write a book?
That's a good way to think about it. First of all, I don't want any more books in the world from people who don't have some unique perspective. So I think until you have that, and that usually comes with experience, just because you've read 10 books on email marketing does not mean you should write a book about email marketing. I know there's certain people who debate that, but I think have a unique take on how you do it that is different than what's already there, because otherwise it's just noise. So to me, that's the table stakes. But really to get to your question is, okay, let's say I have that because you do. Most SaaS founders you and I hang out with at MicroConf have a unique take on something, So then the interesting thing is back in 2010 when I published my first book, and I've self-published all my books. But back then, I already had a blog audience. I had a membership website that was training. It was kind of like marketing for developers is really what it was. I had videos. I had all this stuff. And I felt like, I'm like pretty popular here. It's like kind of more, it's pre-social media, really.
Yeah.
Nothing got me on everyone's radar more than this stupid book. And you know what the book was? It's Start Small, Stay Small, which is now like my legacy. That book was really just a compilation of like the first 3 months of my membership website. It was like a quarter of the content I created, and I pulled it in and I pared it down, and a bunch of it was already written. So it was well written because I was a blogger. But I was kind of repurposing stuff, thinking, I'll sell like 5 or 10 grand of this book just to kind of do whatever, to kind of make some money on it. And then it took off and it sold like 100 copies the next month. And then like Patrick McKenzie tweeted about it, and then Peldy tweeted about it. And then suddenly it was this momentum. And then I started getting these invitations to speak. This was a self-published book. I was paying Amazon $2 a copy to print that existed in a membership website where I was charging way more for it. I was charging like between $500 and $1,000 a year to access this membership website. And I was like, this book's a $20 thing. What? But somehow it led to this credibility that I hadn't anticipated. And ever since then, I've been like, well, I think every X amount of years, I need to just take everything I've learned, no matter if I've put it on a podcast or already said it on a YouTube channel or said it on Indie Hackers or told it to a TinySeed founder or done it in a MicroConf talk. And I do think I need to somehow figure out a way to package that up in a book, because the packaging of a book is and I feel the same way. When I see a book, I'm like, oh, it's a book. That's way more. You can hand me 100 YouTube videos, right, that cover the exact same topic, and I'd be like, whatever. But like a book it's a big deal, man.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? Because I'm the same way. I mean, like when I heard you did the book, I was like, oh man, that's a lot of work. Like that's amazing. And really, I mean, not to minimize it, but you're doing a lot of work every week anyhow, right? So like the cumulative work you do over a year for everything else has to be more than the work you put into the book. But
definitely,
the book carries you years. And totally makes sense about the credibility stuff.
Credibility, and it's evergreen if you write it smart this way. This one's more evergreen than my first one.
Yeah. How do you I'm laughing. I'm laughing because like every podcast episode I do now, I hear the voice of Andy Baldacci in my head saying no, and that's wrong, and you shouldn't focus on that. But something that doesn't matter. Something I've been focusing a lot on recently is like I'll call it founder marketing, maybe, right? Like me as the voice of the brand, talking about what we do, either like at a meta level, like we help companies become media brands in our Castos production service, or talking about podcasting and about marketing in general. You are definitely that, right? For Startups for the Rest of Us and for TinySeed and for MicroConf. Like where are you? And I listened to Startups for the Rest of Us today, and it was your most recent episode talking about like getting tired of it. I won't call it burnout necessarily, but like
I use the word in the episode. So
yeah, kind of saying like, this is tough. Like, I guess like aside from attribution and tracking and metrics and seeing all that stuff, like just how do you view the input side of that to say like, this is important and I should keep doing this and everyone should keep doing this, or there are times and places where it's not important. Like I just generally, how do you think about like a founder being the face of the company? And I'll just I'll say that I think the most interesting part of this right now is freaking Mark Zuckerberg, right? Because like for so long he was just totally transparent to the company, right? Invisible to the company, and now fucking he's on Threads and he's talking and everyone loves him. None of us are him, obviously, but like how do you view that for a founder who's not just starting out where that's the only asset they have, but like you're doing $1 million or 2 or 5 or whatever? Still necessary? Is it smart? Like, I don't know, just how do you think about it?
Yeah, I think about it in a few ways because I've seen, HubSpot is a media brand, right? And they've bought the hustle. And you might say, I'm assuming Salesforce has some type of media brand. I don't follow them, but these big $1 billion companies, Shopify, like you'd be dumb not to have a presence everywhere. They're big. They have money. They're just trying to get more people. They know their lifetime value. I think the danger is a lot of early stage bootstrappers, like I'm doing $1,000 a month. I'm going to start a media brand and that's how I'm going to grow my SaaS. I think that is terrible, terrible advice, unless there's a couple exceptions. If you're starting a podcast hosting company, well, of course you need a podcast because I think you should be, kind of eating your own dog food, so to speak, or walking the walk is a better way to say that. If you're like Wistia, you should be putting out video content, Yep. If you're Vimeo, like there are certain... If you're podcast editing, like there's a bunch of exceptions, but like if I'm going to start, a B2B analytics platform for blah, 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 like do I need to be a media brand? No, you do not. In fact, I think it's a big waste of time and resources in the early days, unless you have a $1 budget. Okay. But the answer, that's not what you asked. You said, what if we're at 1 million or 5 million or 10 million ARR? So we do have the budget and resources to actually reasonably do this. Should the founder be the face of it? And at that point, I would say, does the founder want to do it? Is the founder good at it? And if you try it for 3 months, does it bring enough results to at a minimum be inconclusive and at a positive end, like actually be driving stuff? I mean, that's really how I think about it. No matter what company I start, I could start a B2B analytics app and I would probably want to start a YouTube channel in a podcast. That's just who I am now. But I don't want people to look at me and say, well, Rob does it, therefore I should, because I'm not running a B2B analytics app. I'm running MicroConf and TinySeed. And for those, content marketing in this fashion and becoming a media brand is a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I think about Patrick Campbell as you're saying this and
yep.
They're literally a B2B analytics company, but he likes it and he's really good at it. Which is surprising and not surprising because he's such like an analytical dude, but is just like, he has such a great way of like relaying that information. I really like that perspective because one thing I'm kind of coming to believe is any company can grow in almost any way and via any channel. I mean, like you can probably make, whatever of the common kind of channels, you can probably make them work. And I think that's just nice kind of grace to give folks to say like, hey man, if you want to just freaking own podcasting and that be the way that you grow your network and your business, like you probably can do it. It might not be the most effective or efficient way for everybody. But yeah.
So I agree with you. And I think that if I had, let's say I had landing page, B2B landing page software, these days it's a commodity, obviously, and built in everything else, but could I grow that by becoming a media brand? I probably could. It's probably not the most efficient way, but if that's my hammer, then I would do what Clay Collins did. That's how we grew lead pages and was doubling year over year. It's some of the fastest, maybe the fastest growing bootstrap SaaS company ever. I don't know. It's hard to know. We don't Basecamp and MailChimps, but lead pages had this crazy growth trajectory. Interesting point of fact. He burned out on creating the content. He hired someone to start creating the content, and that it fell way off because it wasn't the founder. He didn't have the same passion. He didn't have the brand recognition. I mean, it's the same struggle I have where I don't want to record 52 YouTube videos a year, and I don't want to go to all the MicroConfs and MC them. But I also have a tough time replacing myself because for better or worse, people want to see me, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's weird for me to say, but like, that's the two-sided, that's the other edge of the coin in what you're saying. Cause I know you're leaning into content and it's like, I don't know anyone who will do it better than you for Castos, but realize what you're getting into.
Yeah.
You know, and you have to weigh that and really want to do it.
Hey, it's Craig here. You know, while I love podcasting and long form conversations like this, I also really love writing and really love email newsletters. I have a newsletter called Founder Insights, where every Saturday morning I share something I'm learning in my business that I think could help you grow your business sustainably and sanely and profitably as you go along this journey. If you're interested, head over to craighewitt.me/join to get Founder Insights, my newsletter, along with your cup of coffee this Saturday morning. See you there. Yeah, it's interesting. I view this as I don't say temporary, but like there's a time bound to me being this involved, and it is, you know, bringing someone on to help, and we've had that before, and in a lot of ways it's great, but then also there's like, I think one of the most challenging things, and you hear about it and you say, God, that's such bullshit, is like transfer the vision from your mind to your team's mind, and I think that the challenge there is there's just so many levels to that and depth to it that like. To take my brain of what I think content should be and put it in someone else's is easy to get like halfway there and kind of hard to get 80% of the way, but to get like 100% of the way there is so hard without being freaking involved every podcast episode and every video that like, I think you got to stay involved. Just like I'm in all of the product and dev meetings because I want to keep, you know, my take on where that's going. I think it'd be hard to completely let go of that.
It's hard enough to do it in writing, like to write up a brief for a blog post and say, here, writer who knows about Castos, I'm the founder. I'm going to write up the brief and I'm going to be really opinionated in that brief because I'm the founder and that's what I do. And you give it to them and it's like, as you said, 70%, 80% of the way. Even harder to get someone to do that on audio or video. Yeah. It's just not going to happen the same way. Yeah. Right?
You know, it's a trip, man. I haven't had input on a single blog post of ours in probably 4 years.
Oh, that's great.
but like all the other content, like social, you know, podcast, YouTube, like I'm involved a ton now. It's crazy.
That's really nice though.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the blog side.
All right. So like we're going to the cage match now. You're heavily involved in both podcasting and YouTube. How do you think about your investment and like how you position your brand between the two, and then like what you're hoping to get out of them?
It's
for context to bound this a little. Let's say just for MicroConf, because I know you have the MicroConf channel and you have the MicroConf podcast, and you probably put stars the rest of us on YouTube, but like I know that you're more YouTube centric for MicroConf.
Yeah. Here's how I would frame the cage match is the MicroConf YouTube channel, because that's really where I spend my time building, and then startups for the rest of us as the podcast. Okay, fine. Because the problem with the MicroConf podcast is it's repurposed content. It's repurposed from YouTube. It's repurposed from talks and other things. It's not, right? I don't record 52 new episodes a year like I do with it. So I would put those two, startups for the rest of us versus microconf.com/YouTube. Here's how I think about it, man. I think of our podcast much more like I think of our email list in the terms of its owned media. I know that technically, Castos, you own our feed. You host our feed. So there's platform risk there.
And we tried to break it a few weeks ago, but didn't
no,
succeed.
that was, oh my gosh, that was us and freaking Feed Blitz.
No,
I cannot.
I know.
Anyways, now that we're here, and I know that Apple and Spotify, there's all these podcast providers. There is platform risk there. But to me, the podcast is long form, deep, direct relationship. That's how I think about it. And that's how I think about our email list. Not necessarily long form, but it's like this direct connection, right? It's how I can reach people. Now, the podcast is anonymous, but people who listen to the podcast, they are diehards. It's like 30 minutes every week for 52 weeks a year for how many years people listen. And that is, it's a big deal. Like, you're in their ear. I can't underscore that. As a guy who blogged, I blogged strong for 6 years, hundreds and actually probably into the thousands of hours that I spent writing. And the reason I stopped was because I would get to the top of Hacker News pretty regularly. I get to the top of Dig back when that was like number one on Dig, and I'd get 50,000 uniques in a day. And I figured I could do it probably 1 out of 4 posts. And at one point I surveyed my audience and I was like, what do you like most about my blog? Rob Walling's writing. And a bunch of people said, I don't know, because I read your stuff in an RSS feed in Google Reader, and I don't really know what you write. I can't remember stuff that you write versus stuff that other people write. And I was like, I'm a freaking commodity. I'm spending all this time and no one cares. That comes back a little bit to, well, put it in a book, dummy, because then you're not a commodity. Yeah. And B, we had just started the podcast, right? I stopped blogging really in 2011. Podcast started in 2010. That was when people they don't confuse me with the other podcasts anymore, because they know it's Rob, and at that time it was Mike, and they know my voice. Yeah. And when I run into them, I got recognized in, this is weird, but I got recognized in a Starbucks a month ago. I got recognized in an airport. I was talking, this was from YouTube, so they saw my face, but I was ordering at a Starbucks and someone's like, are you Rob Walling? And I was like, how'd you know? And he's like, your voice. You know what I mean? That would never happen as a blogger. So to me, that's, I love the podcast. Now, the problem with the podcast is I've been doing it for 13 years and it's, it has tens of thousands of listeners, and I've been doing YouTube for 18 months and it has tens of thousands of listeners approaching 6 figures. We're at 63,000. It is growing 10 times faster than the podcast. But I view YouTube, huge platform risk, and I view it as social media. It is like Twitter. YouTube to me is like long form video on Twitter or on Instagram. It's just it's hub and spoke, right? I don't view it as the hub of anything, but I do view our email list and our podcast as that. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's how I feel about it.
Super interesting. Yeah. It's funny because we talk with our customers, but you mentioned media brand, that's the angle that we're taking on Castos Productions these days. We're not a podcast editing service. We transform companies into media brands, right? So, and it's holistic, it's social, it's YouTube, it's podcast, it's written content, it's a newsletter blurb. And to where, like this, right, we're going to sit down and talk for an hour, and then we have fucking 15 pieces of content that I can put out over the next week that are all super high quality at, oh my God, a fraction of the price of hiring a marketing person, right? By the way.
Yep.
And what I struggle with a little bit, and it's funny, I use the exact same words, is you want to take people from borrowed media, social media, to owned, which is website, podcast, and email. And I don't know where to put YouTube because what is it, right? In a way, it's a search engine. In a way, it's a content aggregator, right? If you write for Forbes or something, or I don't even know what Medium, and in a way, it's a social network because there's comments and shit like that. I don't know, man. I just will tell you that we're the same way that YouTube is massively important, and it is the thing I think about it is there is such a barrier to entry to do really well that I think that is where a lot of the opportunity is you gotta buy the $500 mic, and you gotta have the big ass light that's hot as hell, and you gotta have the nice looking backdrop where a podcast, we could turn the camera off right now and no one would know and it would still be great, and my $70 microphone is perfectly good for a 20,000 download an episode podcast. But to do a YouTube channel really well is, I mean, not just that stuff I mentioned, but like the fucking effort to like make an interesting 10-minute YouTube video is incredible.
It's huge.
And then the editing afterwards. I mean, it is many, many, many times the effort. But I agree. I think if I had to say I'm going to do one thing to grow our company, that would be it.
So I want to agree with you and add something to that. Our fastest growing channel across everything I do is YouTube.
Yeah.
Right. So that to me we are pumping more money into YouTube than any other single effort. To your point, it is expensive and it is time consuming, but it's paying off for us.
Yeah.
The reason, and I want to come back to something I said earlier, and I think you said it as well, where you're like email and podcast are owned media, and someone might think, well, why isn't YouTube or Twitter? Anytime you're at the mercy of an algorithm, it's not owned media. And I want to give you an example. If I tell you, hey, Craig, Startup for the Rest of Us has, let's make up a number, 20,000, 30,000 listeners. What I mean by that is that I get 20,000 downloads per episode or 30,000 downloads per episode. That's what happens. Like those are real people that are at least, we don't know if they're listening, but we're at least getting downloads. When I tell you that I have 63,000 YouTube subscribers, and then I put out a YouTube video and it gets 6,000 views, that's pretty common. If one of our videos doesn't kind of take off, it gets 6,000 views. We're getting 10% of our audience, of our subscribers, to watch a video. And that is that's a big difference. So we can say in that example, 30 to 60,000, let's just, make it easy math. It's like, well, YouTube, you have twice the audience. And it's like, not really. I don't get twice the consumption. I don't get twice, what do you care about? Having numbers, or do you care about actually having people consume the content? So that's why I think about it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you, on the YouTube front, are you shooting shorts, like dedicated shorts, or are you just repurposing them out of longer form stuff?
We have tried both. Right now, we are repurposing out of longer form stuff. And it seems to be, actually, I might need to check. We may not even be doing shorts anymore. I think we did a test of 2 or 3 months, and we found it wasn't worth the effort. I think that's maybe where we landed. I would actually need to go to our own channel. This shows you how disconnected I am from actually. But to your point of
that's where you should be standing, right?
Exactly, right? I should be. Yep.
Yeah.
I want to record stuff, and then I want 15 pieces of content to go live, in 2 weeks. To your point of I've built that engine internally, but I think more people, of course, should come to Castos and have you do it for them.
Yeah, yeah. It's a trip, man. I'll share my my process. So I wrote a blog post about this, craighewitt.me, on the blog, where it's really great now, man. So Christina, my executive assistant, we have a call Tuesday morning, and I do my hair and I get the light on and make sure the camera works. And we talk for about 45 minutes, and I give her about 20 1-minute blurbs, and she takes those and cleans them up and edits them. And I get portrait and I get square. And then that's my content for the next 2 weeks.
Wow.
It's awesome. It's so
great.
awesome. Now that's for my personal stuff and the cool thing about that, we talk about batching. Like that could be all of my social media for 2 weeks. I do a little bit of like text-based stuff just on LinkedIn right now. But I do the same. I've played around both ways. I do the same thing on the Castos YouTube channel, and we're just starting to pull stuff because we got like 180 videos there. Starting to pull some stuff there from the most recent videos for shorts, and haven't seen how they perform yet. I don't know. I think kind of talking about how like you pulled stuff from like a YouTube's transcript or a podcast episode into the book and it didn't work. Like I wonder if the same thing will happen where like just kind of like emotionally you're halfway through a thought and you pull that bit out. If like people can tell versus if you took that same idea and just shot it at the camera for 45 seconds, if it would perform better.
Yeah, I mean, I see people doing it with success. Like my first million pulls it just out of their interviews, and some of those catch.
Yeah.
It depends on if the content's really good. If it's Neil Patel saying he spends 150 grand a month on on his help or whatever. I don't know if you saw that one. Like that one went viral, and so I don't know that it matters. I think it's here's bad advice that I have received, Craig, is people were telling me 2-3 years ago, like, you have to be on YouTube. And I'm like, all right, what do I need to be doing? I don't have the time or the money to do the full production. No, you just repurpose. You just do clips. You just do, because, Joe Rogan, he got big based on clips, and Howard Stern, big on clips, and whoever else, insert another person who's talking about Mark Maron, super general stuff, and is interviewing Elon Musk and having him smoke a doobie on camera. It's like, well, if I was doing that, then of course my clips are going to be amazing. But guess what? My topics are really fucking boring, except for the 100,000 people who love what I do. So me getting a 30-second clip of, me pontificating about the Beatles and how they relate to startups, I mean, that's fine, but it doesn't work. You can't translate what Joe Rogan is doing to what we're doing. I shouldn't say you can't. You need to be really careful about taking that. And so that's I think where I stand on it is I think clips can work. I think you're probably right. Every time I've tried something to do it actually native to the format, it winds up better. I also think you don't need to. The
marginal benefit of that is probably arguable.
It just depends. Yeah, I mean that's where it is. How much time and money do you have?
Yeah. I'm going to take a slight detour from our planned discussions to talk about I know across the TinySeed companies and just, SaaS in general, like more than almost everyone I know about this. Like I'll say maybe we don't have headwinds, but the tailwinds we all experienced over the last few years are kind of dwindling. I think. Like, where do you see companies who are growing fast, either in reality or kind of hypothetically? Like, where do you see companies executing on growth well over the next few years?
So I'll say one general thing. The companies that I see executing on growth well, at least at our stage, which is, let's say 6 and 7 figure ARRs for the most part, the founder inevitably is pretty involved in that growth. We certainly have founders who, let's say they get to 2-3 million and then they hire a head of growth. Usually they go through 1 and then 2 and then find one on the third. It's because it's so hard to find someone who's good and who can continue what the founder's doing. But a conversation I have now and again with TinySeed founders specifically is they say, all right, we have product market fit, and we're hitting that. We're at 15-20K MRR. Like, we want to do what I call escape velocity, which is where you actually have a marketing channel that works and that's scalable. How do we get there? Who do we hire? How can I hire someone to do this? And usually I'm like, look, you can, and I can give you a bunch of recommendations. I just almost have never seen it done without the founder. I mean, you're a case in point here of you driving growth over the years, even though you've hired people to help you. Our friend Ruben Gomez with Signwell. We have our team at Scraping Bee, who's very public about they're doing multiple 7 figures in ARR. They're public about their revenue. I could go on, right? I could list more than a dozen that are just some of the faster growing TinySeed companies. And in every example, it's like, oh yeah, no, the founder's a really good salesperson. Oh yeah, the founder knows a lot about marketing. So that's a general high level thing. I think we kind of know that at our core maybe, but the data that I'm seeing, the anecdata that I'm seeing, across my portfolio is reinforcing that. To your actual question, which is really where do you see it going? I mean, like today, man, some people will say like cold outreach is dead. And cold outreach, I think, to people like you and I is dead. Like, I don't respond to any of that. Cold outreach still works in niches that are not oversaturated with it, right? So that's like one example. Content and SEO, if you're good at it, I mean, is ChatGPT and AI going to eliminate SEO? I don't know. Or is it just going to change it? And is it going to be around long enough for the next couple of years that you can still build?
Yeah.
You don't need to build $1 billion company, right? If you build a $5 million company, it's growing fast. You can sell for a lot of money. And I still think there's room for that. There's really 20 B2B marketing approaches, man. I list them in the SaaS Playbook, and I'm happy to, you can take a picture of that page and put it in the show notes. I'm not trying to sell my book, but like there aren't that many.
Yeah.
And what I see is typically it depends on your niche. But there are 5 that most people try first, right? It's content, it's SEO, it's cold outreach, It is integrations and partnerships,
yeah.
and it's pay-per-click, whether that's Facebook ads and AdWords and Insta. Those are still the 5 most popular. And then there's a few more stuff like podcasts and YouTube and such, but I don't know.
I'll tell you, man, like I asked partly because we've been fortunate and unfortunate to grow at almost the exact same kind of absolute amount for 6.5 years now, which is great that we've been growing for that long, but almost nothing we've done has changed that trajectory. And we've fucking tried it all, tried to go up market, tried integrations and partnerships, tried growing the product, going to enterprise, all this kind of stuff. And like, we kind of just like say at this point, man, like, yeah, I don't know if AI is going to kill Google. Like, probably not, right? It's like one of the biggest companies in the world. They're going to figure out a way for google.com to still, be the place that people go for answers. And I just think that, like, for us, it is the only way that we can grow, like, we can't make PPC work. We've tried so many fucking times, and I just spent another 10 grand on it, and it's not working. Partnerships, I don't know. Some people in our space are growing via like affiliates and stuff like that. That just like, I want to be a profitable company that has actual money at the end of the day, and like giving 30+% to people every month is really tough. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't like, I think it's closed-minded a little bit of me, but it's also like worked to an extent so far. And so like that's my hypothesis, is that we have many more layers to go on this, that we've kind of exhausted the first one a little bit. And we have this other layer of maybe YouTube and maybe like other kinds of content to take and to this next level. I don't know, man. Like I guess in a way, I give myself some solace to say, like, I don't have to go figure it out. We just have to do a better job than we're doing now, which is nice, because otherwise, I think one of the fucking terrible things in marketing is you have these 20 approaches and you literally can do all of them, and you can do really shitty at all of them, and then you're nowhere. Or you can just say, fuck it, I'm putting the blinders on, and for the next year, we're doing this. Right. And you'll probably be better off.
Well, especially if that's already working for you and it's just plateaued and you just want to expand it, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Finding a new marketing approach that works is one of the, aside from finding product market fit in the first place, finding a new marketing approach that you can make work and scale is probably one of the hardest things in growing a startup, right? Yeah. It is just really hard. And so if you have something that's working and you just double and triple down on it, the danger is, I think that if you are going to try, well, you got to look at not just where your customers are coming from, but it's like, where do the best customers come from? Yeah. And if the best customers are coming from that, then of course, should I spend twice as much on
Google?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So there you go. How can I, and here's things that we should all be thinking about is like, so how do I go and just try to buy websites? How do I buy competitors? How do I acquire things, or how do I knock everybody off the first page of Google? And that just becomes my mission, Yeah. These are certainly ways to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is, I think it is definitely more splintered. It's hard to say, because it does depend. Like, we have some really niche TinySeed companies, and like they can still just go in and just blow the doors off with SEO and own most of the first page of Google, and they're just like growing like a weed. But let's put them aside and go with more horizontal, I would say podcast hosting, or something where there's a lot more competition. In those spaces, it is inevitably a bunch of different channels that each bring in. I mean, even Drip, right? I sold this in 2016. There was no single channel that was more than maybe 20% of our new trials. It was where historically, like everything I'd done before that was always like one or two major channels and they just drive it. It was like 15, 20% from integrations. And we got like 10% a month from ads, and then it was like from the podcast, and it was all these little chunks, which kind of sucked because I never knew what to double down on. But also it was pretty neat because we were really diversified. And so if we got dinged by Google, it actually didn't hurt us that much.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Interesting.
It's hard. And it's worse. It's more competitive today, right, than it was 7 years ago.
Oh, sure. So. Yeah. Cool, man. Always a pleasure. Thanks for coming on and chatting. It's really cool to catch up, and congrats on the book. So SaaSPlaybook.com for folks who want to pick it up.
Yep. Would love to have them. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
And other places to connect, startupsfortherestofus.com, MicroConf.com, RobWalling.com, Twitter.
@RobWalling.
at Rob Walling. Cool. All right, buddy. See ya.
Thanks, man.